Hello there, I'm Azara Tagaya and this is Ringgit Sense, the show where we talk about personal finance and issues pertaining to money that affect you personally. Starting today, we'll be back on air every Monday. Now, a lot has happened since we were last on air. The general election, a change in government, and with that, a few promises were made towards reducing the cost of living. Now, one of the major promises made by the new government is to standardize the minimum wage in Malaysia and gradually raise it to 1,500 ringgit by the end of its term. Currently, the minimum wage is 1,000 ringgit in Peninsular Malaysia and 920 ringgit in East Malaysia. Now, there are already grumblings from employers as there are complaints it will raise the cost of doing business. But what do employees think about the plan?
We turn to Malaysian Trades Union Congress MTUC Secretary General J. Solomon to get his views on the government's plans to raise the minimum wage to 1,500 ringgit.
Of course, it is much more better than the current 1,000 ringgit. But it is also reported that the 1,500 which they mentioned, they want to gradually increase in the next 5 years.
Let's take a quick look at the background of minimum wage in Malaysia that was introduced on the 1st of January 2013. Provisions in the Minimum Wage Act states that reviews must be done once every 2 years. A review was only done in July 2016, a delay of about 18 months. With the rise in living cost, especially among the lower income group, J. Solomon says MTUC is proposing a higher minimum wage of 1,800 ringgit.
We did not pluck that figure from the tree, but we had a regional meeting among the unions within Southeast Asia. And then we came up with a figure of US $50 per month for less developed countries and US $50 for developing countries. So for Malaysia, we decided on US $50 per week. And that is where we came up with almost 800 ringgit. And with the current 1,000 ringgit, decided our proposal should be 1,800 ringgit.
Some employers have opposed the idea of raising the minimum wage, saying that it would raise inflation and raise the cost of doing business. J. Solomon says such views are not uncommon.
But they must also understand, in the last 20 years or more, there has been a disparity between productivity and wage. So I think the time has come now for the employers to actually ensure that there is a fair wage for the workers. I think the employees are also fully aware. The salaries paid to the top management sometimes is rather ridiculous. We have received reports like even GLCs, CEOs are receiving salaries 100,000, 300,000, 400,000. Even there's been a report of almost 1 million in a month. So you have someone receiving a salary of 1 million and someone receiving a minimum wage of 1,000. And that is the reason why there is a high income inequality in this country. So it's high time that this government must look into that and actually bring the CEOs into the table to discuss why is it that they should not be paid 1,800 when the CEOs are receiving such a huge salary. We are not asking for an equal salary, but I think we are merely asking for an equitable salary so that we can sustain, especially the B40 and M40.
He also states that setting a minimum wage is essential to reduce our dependence on foreign workers, another issue that the new government is also hoping to work towards. J. Solomon says that with a higher minimum wage, employers will find it easier to hire locals for jobs that foreigners normally do.
We are also surprised that even for foreign workers, even an undocumented foreign worker, he would not want to work for 1,000 ringgit. I give you an example. We were told when the former government came out with a pilot program for the refugees, especially the Rohingyas, to work in the plantation with a minimum wage, and they can earn overtime, and it can come up to almost 1,500 ringgit per month, and they are provided housing and etc. Even for a Rohingya refugee, they refuse to work for that kind of salary. So you can imagine, how do you expect a local to actually work for that amount of salary?
Some viewpoints there from MTUC. Next up, we'll be speaking to the Malaysian Employers Federation, and we'll also have a human resources expert in the studio. How much do they think the new minimum wage should be? Stay with us to find out. Welcome back to Ringgit Sense. Today we're talking about the topic of minimum wage. And with us in the studio today is Datuk Syamsuddin Bardan, the Executive Director of the Malaysian Employers Federation, and Professor Dr. Balakrishnan Parasuraman, an expert in human resources and industrial relations. And today we're going to talk more about minimum wage and how it's decided and how it actually affects Malaysians. Datuk, Professor, thank you so much for joining us on Ringgit Sense. Now, first of all, we'll start with you, Datuk Syamsuddin. Sure. Can you explain to our viewers how minimum wage actually works? How is it decided by the government?
Of course, I mean, what we have normally is the process of reviewing, which is going to happen every 2 years. And of course, you know, this year is actually the year where the review ought to be made. And normally, what happens is that the technical committee of the NWCC will go and talk to the stakeholders, and they gather all the information. They'll do the necessary research, go and get the data from the various quarters, and based on that, of course, there are some, I would say, formula on which we are going to review the minimum wages, and they will make the recommendation to the council. And the council will, of course, deliberate the matter, and we come to certain conclusion. And, of course, at the council, decision may not be unanimous. It can be by majority. And normally, it is by way of voting that we decide what ought to be the recommendation of the council to the minister and, of course, to the government after that.
Okay, now we want to know both of your opinions on what you think the new minimum wage should be. So we'll start with you first, Professor Dr. Balakrishnan.
Okay, thank you for TV3 invite for this program. I believe that the minimum wage is not something new in Malaysia. It's already implemented throughout the worldwide. So always the new rate will based on the current economy situation. We look at what employer will think. And that's why just now Dato said, before we come up with the rate, we have to do a thorough research. That's what the role of the technical committee. And the technical committee will collect data, not only data from the FGD, like focus group discussion. We went to all over Malaysia, and we face-to-face, we discussed with the employer, and also we discussed with the employee side. So we are not going to how much the rate, but you can see that the trend is like that based on the current situation. So we like both parties.
Okay, what about you, Datuk Syamsuddin?
Of course, I mean, if you're looking about the current economic situation, of course, it's very challenging indeed. And of course, when we talk to the employers, they are not prepared to have any wage review as far as minimum wages is concerned. The reason being is very simple. You know, beginning of the year, the government decided that the levy of foreign workers should be paid by the employers. And that alone actually cost the employers something like 15% increase in the cost of employing foreign workers. So, of course, if you look at the situation now, most employers hardly can survive in this very challenging environment.
What then about the Pakatan Harapan's government's promise to actually raise the minimum wage to 1,500, but by the end of its term?
We see here that the 1,500 is within the first term of the rule, so meaning that it is not immediate. That I think is something that I think we need to be aware of. And secondly, the Pakatan Harapan say that in order to alleviate the problems, the challenges faced by the employers in having to raise the wages up to that level, then Pakatan Harapan manifesto clearly say that the government is going to subsidize at least 50% of the pay rise. Yeah. So that, I think, is something that we heard a lot about the issues facing government currently, the national debt of about 1 trillion, thing like that. And I'm quite certain that the government would be in a very challenging position if they were to subsidize 50% of whatever increase that the cabinet may decide later on.
Okay, I see. All right. Professor Dr. Balakrishnan, from a standpoint of human resources, what are some of the most common grouses that we hear from employers when it comes to raising the minimum wage? What challenges will employers face when they do this?
Any changes will happen, will affect the SMEs. We see the study done. The big companies still have to pay, like big plantation, but you look at the small, because minimum wage apply to all industry, including small. Yeah. Okay, the small one also we are looking at the trend. And of course, Malaysia need a better working condition. They want a better life, so that when we do the, to justice, give justice to both parties, so that we're looking at the employer side also, and also employee side. So that's why some of the factors that we worry that the SME, SME, but so Dato said that the Pakatan Harapan promised that subsidized. That promise must be fulfilled from my point of view, because if cannot, then how the SME will survive? Because 90% or more than actually SME in Malaysia. Yeah. So they should support structural change, We can raise any amount of salary, doesn't matter. But do you think the company can survive? At the same time, also employees, they want to have better life. So you look at both sides, then the government come. I believe the Pakatan Harapan have to do, no choice. Because you look at Sabah Sarawak, structural change. If you don't giving a better condition, road condition, like people want to sell the things, from the rural to the, the urban area, the roadside, housing, so many things have to be done. And then when the structure will improve, automatically will, and I'm talking about HRDF, you had to put the money to the employees. And the doctor said just productivity. Productivity will come for the motivation, motivate how you want to improve your work performance. Yes. So HRDF, now time for, I know HRDF, they're making a lot of changes. Please, the Pakatan Harapan, make the HRD fund goes to the employees.
Okay, so we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking more about the minimum wage, and we actually want to find out, will increasing the minimum wage have an effect on our dependency on foreign workers? More on that on Ringgit Sense when we return. Back on Ringgit Sense, we're still talking about minimum wage, and we are joined again by our guest in the studio. We have Datuk Shamsuddin Bardan, the Executive Director of the Malaysian Employers Federation, MEF, and also Professor Dr. Balakrishnan Parasuraman, expert in human resources and industrial relations, also from the Faculty of Entrepreneurship and Business at UMK. Now, thank you so much for joining us again. Now, before the break, we talked about the basics of minimum wage, how it actually works, how it's going to affect us. Now, the simple question that we want to know is, will raising the minimum wage actually decrease our dependency on foreign workers? Dato'?
Yeah. Put it this way, before we have our first minimum wage policy on 1st January 2013, at that time, we have something like 2.4, 2.5 billion legal foreign workers. But when the minimum policy was introduced in 2013 at 900 ringgit for West Malaysia and was reviewed in 2016 at 1,000 ringgit in West Malaysia, now we can see that there was a reduction in the number of foreign workers in Malaysia, at least the legal foreign workers. So now we are talking about 1.8 million legal foreign workers. So you can see that there is a reduction of something like 400,000 to 500,000 foreign workers in the country. And this, obviously, the employers find it more expensive for them to employ foreign workers. What more with all the other, pressure from the international community that we must improve our act as far as employment of foreign workers by giving better accommodation and better terms and conditions of employment, things like that. And I would say that now many employers have been talking about trying to change the way they do things, introducing technology and also trying to automate their processes, meaning that they try to reduce on the number of workers that are working for them. In Malaysia, one of the data that we got is to say that there are currently about 1.9 million employees that earn less than 1,200 ringgit per month. Yeah. But we have about 1.8 million legal foreign workers. So if we actually increase the minimum wages, it's likely that the foreign workers are going to benefit most out of it. Yeah? At least more than 95%, because our local workers, normally they are engaged and they are given annual increment on a yearly basis, whereas the foreign worker, they are kept at the minimum level. So if there is a review of the minimum wages, then they are the one who is going to benefit out of it, not the local workers, I would say.
I see. Professor Dr. Bala, what's your take on this? Do you agree with that, though?
Yeah, of course, I have a different opinion. Of course, we always but I think foreign labour is not a new issue. We have to see what Lato said before 2013. Already, I think me and Dato was in the Shrawani 10 years ago. The same suggestion was given, both of us. We are repeating again the same. So what is wrong? Actually, we need the foreign labours, but there's be control. End of the day, one of the objectives of minimum wage actually to reduce the foreign labours and also to increase the automation or technology. But of course, there's numbers like we show the indicator. The study show that the numbers decreasing a little bit. But it's human. When you increase salary, of course, you'll attract people to come. And then under the ILO, you must remember, we ratified the ILO convention. So ILO actually welcome anyone. You cannot discriminate whether foreign or locals. But the time for now is actually both employer and employees to think how to retain our locals. Example I give you, MTC must play a role. Now they have to talk to the members, or any employees to encourage them to come into the labour force, where I think 1,000 ringgit is actually a starting point, And then there will be an employer side to improve also, because they also got PLWS, Productively Work System, where employer no need to wait to 2 years, then it increase the salary. They can start from now. So when you do that, then you slowly bring them to the workforce. I believe like services, like hotel, all these sectors actually can fulfill by the local. Why we still bring the foreigner to take over our job? So I believe these two parties must play a role. So I think there will be some ministry, especially Ministry of looking at the immigration. All this must work together, form one committee, and try to see how to reduce. I'm not said to reduce totally, then employer having problem. Example, plantation, construction. No, many countries like Australia or even in Korea, they have foreign labours, but you legalize them. So when you legalize them, you look at the Sabah, Sarawak, actually Sabah, there are many illegal, there's no working in the plantation sector. But we cannot things going like that. We have to attract them, give something. That's why any changes in the rate always affect both parties. But of course, we cannot stay on the same amount.
Another concern by our viewers is that when we raise the minimum wage, does it mean that the overall salary of all employees will be raised as well? What does it actually affect on normal employees?
No, basically, this is, I think, the misunderstanding and also the wrong perception of the public about minimum wages. Most of the public thought that if there is a review of minimum wages to a higher level, then their respective salary also should be reviewed.
Increments and such,
there is no such thing.
Okay.
Actually, when we talk about review of minimum wages, only employees earning below the review, below the level of the review, the new review rate, then only will get that adjustment. Otherwise, legally, the employer is not obliged to give any further adjustment to the other people who are outside the scope itself.
Okay.
So in that sense, of course, that is at least what on paper is going to happen. But of course, there are sometimes occasions where, say for example, if an employee had been working for the last 10 years, now his pay is 1,005. But then the new minimum wages is inching toward 1,005. Then of course, some employers may want to adjust the 1,005, even though it's legally not applicable, but they want to see some, what they call it as internal equity, so that employees are not feeling bad about the whole thing, and they will also feel that the employee is taking care of their interest, thing like that. And of course, I would say that, minimum wages is not, I think, the way to actually go to improve our earnings. It is just the minimum level. And I would say that, the way for the locals to actually be remunerated is through linking their wages with the stifat skill of the employee. And this is exactly what MEF had proposed to the government. Instead of minimum wages, why not we try to pay our own local people based on the stifat skill of the employee? But unfortunately, currently, we don't have so many people being stifat their skill. And of course, this is where I even suggested to the government to say that since we have some money within HRDF, like what Mr. Bala, Dr. Bala had said, why not we use that money to actually go for mass skilling? In Malaysia, we have what we call it as SKM1. So why not we say that, look, we give free stifat skilling for all these people? The number may be close to 1 million, thing like that. Give them the free skilling. Of course, that will cost the government something like close to 3 billion ringgit, because one certification costs about 300 ringgit. So in that sense, if we are able to do that, then of course people will be now thinking that, yes, why not I try to stify my skill so that I can actually see better wages in my employment. So that in that way, we are going to encourage all the employees to improve their skill. And of course, this will increase their productivity. And in that way, if employers pay higher wages to the employee based on productivity increases, it's not an issue at all. Most employees would love to actually pay more to those people who are performing well, basically.
Okay, some valid viewpoints there. Thank you so much, Datuk Syamsuddin Bradan and also Professor Dr. Balakrishnan. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today's episode. If you want to watch excerpts of today's interview, go to our Facebook page, Ringgit Sense TV3, and that's also where you can get in touch with us if you have any questions or suggestions. I'm Azara Tagaya signing off, and we will see you again next week. Until then, invest and save wisely.